Hi, how you doing? We've been making some changes to the greenhouse to prepare it for spring, hopefully to make it more efficient in holding the heat, as well as a result, extending the season for me just a little bit more. My name is Sharon. I garden on a large yard in a small town in east central Saskatchewan, Zone 3. Welcome to my Sask Garden. So I made a video last year about my little greenhouse. I can put a link in the description if you have not yet seen that video, but I'll just recap quickly. It's 8 feet wide, 12 feet long. The side walls are about 5 feet high, and the peak way up is probably close to 7 feet tall, 7 feet high. Also, it has a Dutch door on the front, so I can open just the top half. I also have the ability to just open it a crack. And then at the back here, there's a vent. And so I do get, a nice cross breeze coming through here. It's a wood frame construction, and it's sided with twinwall polycarbonate. I've always had twinwall polycarbonate, and a couple weeks ago, there's a video where I showed that we had a renovation to the outside where we changed the twin wall from opaque, which I've always had opaque. The opaque is good. It's really good in the heat of summer so it doesn't get quite as much heat gain. It doesn't get to be 50 degrees in here with the opaque. However, in April and May and October and perhaps November, it really doesn't have heat gain very much because the angle of the sun and the strength of the sun, it just doesn't warm up in here too much. And we've changed it to the clear, so it's much brighter in here, and the heat gain is phenomenal. It actually surprises me how much different it is. Even now at the end of October, first of all, it is t-shirt weather out there today. It's a very nice day, but it's getting a little bit toasty in here. I bet you it's 25 degrees. It did go up to 33 in here just 2 days ago when it was bright clear sunshine and not a cloud in the sky. Today just has a little bit of haze, so it's going to be a little bit less, but yeah, beautiful in here, beautifully warm in here, and I can see being able to extend the season at least for the day. Now, the night is a different story. So the clear takes care of the inside temperature during the day, but heat doesn't store unless you have something that can store the heat. That's called thermal mass, and you need to work at that. So most often you'll see 50-gallon drums of painted black, and they hold water. They store heat during the day, and then they release it at night. And I think I calculated that I would need 3 of those drums to somewhat warm up the air temperature within the greenhouse, for this square footage, and that's just too much space. That would just take up too much space. I don't have that kind of space, especially sort of in the middle of the greenhouse is where you'd have to put it. If you are just building or planning, you could actually plan that out by having your benches sit on top of those 55-gallon drums or 50-gallon drums or whatever they are. You could possibly do it that way as long as they were on the correct wall and gaining the heat that they needed to. So, putting it over on the west side of the greenhouse probably wouldn't be, a sufficient place for me. That's where my water barrels actually sit. I do have a couple of water barrels here that do heat up during the day. I can't say that they really play a big role in keeping the greenhouse warm at night. Honestly, I just keep those water barrels filled during the summer just to be able to water things in here, particularly with warm water. I do like it to get warm. So if you don't have that thermal mass to release heat at night, the inside greenhouse, this surprises new greenhouse growers or new people who are new to having a greenhouse. It surprises them that the inside temperature is just as cold as the outside temperature at night. I've seen many comments like that where people are, you know, oh, I set up a greenhouse and it got down to freezing last night, and it was freezing, or it was even below freezing inside the greenhouse, because the greenhouse will actually trap cold air as well, and it sometimes can be colder inside than it is outside. That happens in this one fairly often if I don't have heat. Last night the temperature got down to 4.7 outside, and the low recorded within the greenhouse was 4.2. So it, you know, it's not storing heat. It won't store heat unless you have something within the greenhouse for the heat to store. Water is a good thermal mass. So is moist soil. I noticed that last year with the peppers. Once I had the 10-gallon grow bags along the bench here filled with peppers, the nighttime temperature was substantially warmer because that soil in the black grow bags gathered heat during the day. But on cold nights, I rely on a little space heater. It sits just on those bricks over by the door. It sits low, so it has a fan, and it also oscillates. So then it moves the air around a little bit more in the greenhouse. Warm air rises, and so that's why I keep it low. If you had it up high, it would heat it up here, and down low it would always be cold. So I do have 2 water barrels. They aren't 50 gallons. I don't know what they are, but I do have 2 in here that in the spring I will fill up with water. They may help. I'm also starting to collect jugs, so I'm going to line probably the benches on the sides. I'm going to line them with milk jugs or vinegar jugs or any kind of jugs like that. If I get to it, I will paint them black, which will help them gather more heat. I do notice that sometimes I fill my watering cans, and so I have 2 dark green ones, and they will turn warm very quickly, the water inside. And then I have a yellow one, and that one doesn't turn as warm as quickly. Eventually it does, but not initially. It doesn't. The dark green ones definitely warm. The water warms up in them a lot faster, even outside. The sun hits it and it just seems to absorb the heat. As I said, I rely on a small heater at night. Or I've only ever come into the greenhouse and moved plants into the greenhouse toward the end of April, sometime early May. It always depended on the weather, because up until this point I haven't been able to keep it more than 10 degrees warmer inside the greenhouse than out with my little heater. And I don't really want to go to a big, 240 volt heater or something that's going to use a great deal of power. I'd rather take measures otherwise to be able to make this space more efficient. And that is where we've made some permanent and some temporary changes to make it more efficient. First of all, Andy has installed rigid insulation all around the greenhouse on the bottom 2 feet. The north wall has been, on the outside of the north wall, has been, we have plywood on that outside wall. We did that actually last year. And here on the outside, I bought greenhouse tape, and 3 inches wide. I know it's hard to see here, but this is where the opaque meets the clear. We overlapped it some, and then I taped all the seams pretty much everywhere that I could find a seam. Also here in the door frame, there's some tape in there just to stop the wind when the door is closed, as well as up here there's tape in there, and also on the corners, because there is basically a seam there. I've taped all that too. Anywhere where there's a gap, and that cold air could get in. And I've also sealed up the inside with tape as well. Now down here underneath the benches, Andy installed some plywood, and this is in the middle of the greenhouse at the 6-foot mark, and he installed that plywood on both sides, and that essentially blocks it off on the bottom. Those are permanent structures, and they also provide a little bit of support for the benches when they start getting heavy with 10-gallon bags of soil, and wet soil at that. And then these pieces of wood, just press board I think it's called, anyways, they're not very thick. These pieces of wood are just in here temporarily, as is this piece here in the peak, and then again on this side. So that's how it looks, sort of from top to bottom. And the reason for all that is to be able to hang a curtain so that the greenhouse is essentially cut off or cut in half. And in the spring, when I get in here and I want to start heating things, I only need to heat half the greenhouse. In the spring, I don't need a full greenhouse. It's just not necessary. I'm bringing in some transplants. I have basically 12 feet plus another 18 feet of shelf space that will hold a lot, you know, generally small transplants. And then by early May, I should be able to take this down and utilize the whole greenhouse. And if I still need to heat at that point, you know, unless it's colder than -10 at night, that's usually my limit. If it's colder than -10, my heater will only heat 10 to 12 degrees. That was last year. Now with all of this insulation and all of these measures that we've taken, it may very well heat better. I'm hoping, like, that's what all this is for. On the west wall, I've also installed bubble wrap, and I still have, you know, I've just been using bubble wrap, just save some, and as I get it, I still need to do a little bit more, and I may do, you know, say a foot just on this bottom part of the south side. I'll see. I'm going to see how it goes. Bubble wrap is supposed to be very good for installing within the greenhouse so that the heat doesn't escape, and, you know, probably keeps the cold at bay as well a little. So the last part of this puzzle is I bought a clear tarp, and this tarp will install across a lot more easily than last year. Last year I had poly, it was kind of all over the place, and, you know, it was a struggle to keep it. So this right now, I thought it would hold well just with some screws, but there's quite a bit of air gap. So although we do have it set up with screws, and then I can just take it and roll it up easily when I'm not using it. We have decided to go instead with Velcro on the sides and at the top to probably seal that gap just a little bit more. Anyways, this is kind of what I did last year, but it was a big pain to get it rolled and unrolled, and it wasn't fitting on the sides because of the benches and just trying to keep everything tucked in, I guess. It was a bit of a challenge. And so I, you know, kind of thought about that throughout the year, wondering how I could go about doing it. I don't know, now that I think of it, if that tarp necessarily had to be clear. I don't know. I think I'm going to, if I'm in here, if I have plants in here, I'm going to be in here at least periodically throughout the day. And during the day, I'm pretty sure I'll roll up that curtain or roll up that tarp. But it is fairly thick. I like the idea that it had the grommets to use as well. But we did order the hook and loop, or the Velcro. We did order that to install it on this, and then install another strip on here and be able to, I think it'll work better. That was Andy's idea, and it was a good idea. My idea was just the screws, and they kind of stick out on this side, so there's a little bit of a hazard there. Knowing me, I probably will jam my hand again against it or something like that, but I think the Velcro will work better. And, so we're not actually going to use any of this setup. This is set up and it'll stay this way. But we won't use the tarp until spring, and I think I'm going to store it inside. It is kind of like a really thick plastic, clear plastic, more than, a woven kind of tarp material. This is the plastic, and I'm just not sure how it will survive in here when it, in the middle of winter when it's really cold. Early last summer, we installed this exhaust fan, and it is powered by this solar panel right here that is mounted on the inside. It seems to get sufficient solar energy to keep it running. Now it's off right now. If the sun goes behind a cloud, it won't run at all. It doesn't store solar power. It's just powered by solar, and you can see it works very well. It doesn't look like they're all moving really fast, but they are all at full speed. And if you go to the other side and you hold your hand there, you can feel all that hot air that is being exhausted from the inside. And it, at the same time, it pulls in the cool air from the door. I've had to open the door now because it's really quite toasty in here. Yeah, it's 25 in here, so it's and with the sun shining, I think the feels like is probably a lot more. Anyways, it is nice and toasty. I think that when it starts, when it the hot months, the June, July, and August, I think I'm expecting to have to utilize shade cloth. I think it will be not only too bright but too hot to not use it. So I already have shade cloth. I didn't think it really necessary to buy new stuff. The most efficient way to cool a greenhouse with shade cloth is to have it on the outside. But I just don't see how that's going to work here. Not only do we have strong wind, but it's sustained wind. Like, it can just be windy all day long. It's not necessarily the odd gust of 50 kilometers an hour or 30 miles an hour or whatever it is. It's like, 75 kilometers an hour all day long, and maybe gusts up to 90. The wind is definitely a consideration here. I don't want to mess with putting shade cloth on the outside and trying to keep it anchored so that it's not going to come loose or break or pull something or whatever. I'm going to utilize the shade cloth on the inside, and the way I'm going to do that, my shade cloths are, you've probably seen them because I use them outside. They're a heavier kind of a plastic shade cloth. I think they're 40%. I'm pretty sure they are. And we bought some hooks to put up into the peak, into the wood beam across the top. And I have some 10 or so foot lengths of rebar, and I'm going to zip tie the long end of that shade cloth. I'm going to zip tie it onto a length of rebar, and then that rebar will just hook onto the hooks at the top, and then it'll come across the south side, and we'll also put hooks on on the south side on the wall, and there will be another length of rebar, and then I can drop the rest of the curtain. I don't know how wide my curtains are. I know they're about 12 feet or perhaps a little bit more long. I'm not sure how wide that shade cloth is. I'm sure it's at least 6 feet, if not 7. 12 by 7 kind of comes to mind. But I mean, I know it's for sure this part of the roof is 4 feet. And so I know for sure it's going to cover that, and it will fall down 2 or 3 feet here. It may cover the whole wall on that side. And so, you know, I think I'm going to grow peppers in here again next year. There's a video, or maybe 2, and I'll link those below if you've not seen them, of me growing sweet bell peppers and hot peppers in 10-gallon grow bags here in the greenhouse. Next year, this past year I did 3. This year coming up, I'm planning on doing 4 bags. Each bag can take 3 peppers, so it'll be 12 plants, and I think they're going to be 4 different varieties as well. And so I may have room for 5, we'll see, but 4 for sure, 4 bags of peppers. And you know, peppers can sun scald, etc. So I will have to take measures to protect them in some way, but they should enjoy the heat. Anyways, I'm pretty sure that's all I have about the changes to the greenhouse. If I have not addressed something, either in this video or the one that from last year, the initial one where I talk about the greenhouse, and if you have questions about something, ask questions in the comments, and I will certainly try to answer them to the best of my ability. And you know, just with my experience, my 24 years of utilizing a greenhouse, I wouldn't give it up for the world. And every year I just try and make it just a wee little bit better, you know, and hopefully this year, this is a lot more than we've ever done before in terms of, you know, the insulation and certainly the clear stuff, all the taping that I've done to seal it up. It is very well sealed. I am going to have to figure out exactly how those maple bugs are getting in though. My camera keeps overheating, so I'm going to have to cut this one off for today. Thanks very much for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Tell your friends, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. See you.